Hey, welcome to the 1 Minute News, a little bonus edition episode where we dive deeper into some of the stories over the day. I'm kind of bored today, so I figured I'd give you a bonus episode a little earlier in the week. I thought the story was really interesting and kind of made me think about stuff I constantly talk about on this podcast about as far as like how the media is unbelievably biased and how they lean one way, and if you were to ever speak up, you get pretty much canceled or fired. And it kind of happened. And this is about a story about a woman who claims to be a centrist as well. So she's not conservative leaning, but even a centrist is considered a conservative, or as she said, a Nazi and a racist, as they called her at work. So the New York Times opinion writer quits and slams paper for illiberal environment. So I guess she just figures it's just not a very positive place to work, where being anti-Trump is orthodoxy. And that's kind of what we've seen through media constantly, is how even if Trump does something good for America or people, it's considered bad in some capacity. There's no way for him to ever do anything good despite him doing something good. And I think that's kind of the problem. And said that she was bullied at work for wrong think. See, I hate that term wrong think, because when we think of wrong think, it's somebody controlling a narrative and controlling a way of perceiving the world, and it being the only right way. And if you don't view the world as the same as those around you, then you are considered other than them. So you're not even considered a human. You're considered a racist. So let's dive into this story a little bit. New York Times writer has announced she has quit because of the illiberal environment and being bullied by coworkers for wrong think. She joined in 2017. She was considered a risk-taking, and now she's considered a liability at the Times. She was a controversial editor, which is always exciting to read. And I think, honestly, the whole term controversial, I think that if you're a writer or a journalist, that you should be in some capacity controversial, because you should be going against the grain and you should be trying to find out the real stories of what's going on, and not just going with the flow or posting up simple stories for people to consume and read and just go about their day. But as a journalist, you're supposed to be captivating, and that in some regard that is controversial, to be captivating. She dated SNL's Kate McKinnon, who don't judge me, but at one point that girl was funny, and then as soon as that show got so woke, I just got so bored of the same stuff. I mean, she would just pop up. This is a random tidbit. She just pop up in the middle of a scene as like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or like Hillary, or like or just anybody in Trump's cabinet. I remember when she did the Alabama guy. What's his name? I'm forgetting. But it's just anytime she like just comes in as a political character, people lose their minds. They're like, oh my God, look, she's hilarious. She's not even saying anything. She's just being Kate McKinnon. That's all she has to do. I don't think she's that funny. I think she's a little overrated. I hope she goes back to her old comedy days, because she was a lot funnier at the beginning. Anyways, back to the story. She was creating a hostile work environment for employees that essentially had anything other than left-of-center views. And you would think a newspaper writing agency would want to have diversity in their writers, diversity in the way they think and the way they write, so it captivates a larger audience rather than just being focused on one audience, especially a newspaper like New York Times, who's supposed to be this pillar of journalism. So you would think that it would be more well-rounded, not just like a conservative leniency or a liberal leniency. It's more centered, where it's you have like the outside, then you have the middle, and then you have the very middle. She says this mentality of the left center views resulted from her being constantly bullied by coworkers who called her a Nazi and a racist because of her own forays into wrong think. And I think that is just insanity. I hate that we are at a point in our society and culture where as soon as you have a different opinion or a different thought, that you are automatically labeled a Nazi and a racist. And I think my biggest problem is that I think words have meaning. And so when you say words like racist or Nazi, when they're in fact not being racist or not being Nazi-like, it ruins the definition. So much so that we almost forget history when people use words like Nazi so fervently, they just throw it out there all the time, that it completely loses its meaning and definition, and then it becomes something less. And then we forget how horrible the Nazis were and how horrible racists are. So I think I am on her side. Showing up for work as a centrist at an American newspaper should not be required bravery. And that is correct. Even if you show up at work at an American newspaper as a conservative, that should not be considered bravery. That is absolutely ridiculous. It should be considered the normality. You should be judged based on how well you write, not your views on the world. And that's more and more where we see these larger companies leaning towards, and that's what's creating these smaller sanctions of journalists, newspaper writing, and just overall YouTube channels. So they've created this. They hate those people because it takes away from their audience, but they are the reason these have started, because there's people that have different views, or like somebody like me who likes to try to think logically about ideas and not just be one-sided or only promoting one party. I don't have a space because I don't want to lean towards one way as much as possible. Okay, cut. Okay, back. She goes on to say, instead a new consensus has emerged in the press. But perhaps especially in this paper, the truth isn't a process of collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few whose job is to inform everyone else. That is an incredible statement. I absolutely love that statement. Instead, a new consensus has emerged in the press, but perhaps especially at this paper. So she's already like throwing them under the bus, which I don't blame her. I would too. She was told basically to shut up and that she's a Nazi and a racist. To be told that is horrible. These words have meaning. She said the truth isn't a process of collective discovery. That is so correct. The more I read the news, the more I'm dive deeper into discovery of journalism. Journalism is dead in most journalistic aspects of life, and most like the larger companies, where it's not about discovering these truths or seeking out truths or finding out the real answers to the problems or shining light on people who are in power, et cetera, et cetera. It's about creating a narrative and then running with that narrative as much as possible to get the clicks, to get the money. I mean, these people are making so much money off your clicks. And I mean, right now I'm using this article, and they all down the right side, there are all these different things for me to click on. There's like two different sides of ads going on. It's ridiculous. But the truth isn't a process of collective discovery. And the truth should be a process of collective discovery. That is the whole problem with science today, is that they also have an agenda where it's not about finding the truth or searching for to see if our hypotheses are correct about certain things. It's about creating a certain hypothesis, and then once that hypothesis is created and it fits a narrative, it's run into the ground. That's why we're seeing this whole backlash back and forth about masks, is because at one point they said masks don't work, and then they said they worked, and then they said, hey, we're actually saving the masks for people in the hospitals, and now they're saying, hey, wait a minute, everyone should be wearing masks, and if you're not a mask, and I've seen, like I saw a story today, it was a new study is out that people who don't wear masks have a smaller cognitive ability to learn. I'm like, are you serious? That's a study? Because I think you made that up.
Yes, I'm not allowed to.
Oh, Siri. Said, so the truth is no longer a process of collective discovery. Love that. But an orthodoxy already known by the enlightened few. Exactly. The enlightened few. I think this goes on to what I'm going to be talking about later in this week, is that politics is the new religion. And there's ones who believe in the truth and that they will do whatever it takes to promote their truth. Like I saw Don Lemon talking about a few weeks ago, that he is not he's an unbiased journalist, but he wants to promote his truth. That is biases. That is 100% what a bias is, is that you are promoting your truth, your bias in the world. Okay, so known as an online few whose job is to inform everyone else. Correct. So the whole point of the paper nowadays, as she's calling it, is that their job is not to learn new information, but to promote their ideology and create stories that fit their ideology. So if you're buying this paper right now and you don't prescribe that ideology, I ask you, why do you even read it? I try to read stuff like this as much as possible. Therefore, I know every side of the argument. But stuff like it starts to get really draining after a while when you can already see. It's like watching a bad movie. You already know what the word's going to be before they write it. And like when you watch the news, you just see when politicians have a talking point, they all just say the same thing or use the same exact phrase. So it gets in your head. It's marketing. And that's what politicians are now. It's just all about marketing their ideologies, as opposed to just having fantastic new ideas or things to get behind. And that's kind of sad. So she was fired. Said, why editing something challenging to our readers or writing something bold only to go through the numbering process of making it ideologically kosher? I love that. When we assure ourselves of job security and clicks. See, that girl, man. She's already my favorite. By publishing our 400th op-ed arguing that Donald Trump is a unique danger to our country and the world. 4,000th op-ed arguing that Donald Trump is a unique danger to the country and the world. And so self-censorship should become the norm. 100% correct. Man, I wish I read this girl's stuff more often. I love when people are waking up to this kind of stuff. And 'cause I don't know how these papers think that they can just get away with just producing stuff like this and promoting stuff like this, of how Donald Trump is a unique danger to the country and the world, blah, 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 blah. You should read it and click it. It's different. It's the same thing that we've written every single week. Just change the words. We use a thesaurus. Op-eds that would have easily been published just 2 years ago would now get an editor or a writer in serious trouble, if not fired. That is 100% correct. That is the same as movies and TV shows today. Things have changed so much so that you cannot be controversial in the lightest, and you cannot try new things. You can only prescribe to what has already been told is okay for today. And that is a huge problem for ideas and a huge problem for gaining traction and discovering new truths. In order to discover new truths, you have to try new things, and you have to sometimes be controversial. And that is where we have gone to now, where we can't even ask questions without it being seen as racist or Nazism, or just flat out, whatever your privilege is. So and that's sad. We should always be able to ask questions. We should always be able to talk about things and discuss things. I should have done this earlier. The civil war inside the New York Times between the mostly young wokes, mostly 40-plus liberals, is the same one raging inside the publications and companies across the country. 100% correct. The dynamic is always the same. It's always these young people, I mean, I wouldn't consider myself super old. I think people in my generation and younger are waking up to this in some aspects. In her resignation letter, noted that it took the Times 2 days and 2 jobs to say Tom Kahn op-ed fell short of our standards. So I just like the things that she's saying, but she's not saying anything new. She's saying stuff that conservative writers and people in the conservative realm have been saying for a long time. And that is that ideas are being quashed in order to fit a narrative. And I'm happy to see that more and more people are waking up to this and seeing this for what it is. The whole reason I started the 1 Minute News is because I just got so tired of seeing commentary and not news. And there was never a time where the news wasn't biased. I always hear like older generations talk about, remember when the news was the news. The news was never the news in some aspects. People just think that way because you didn't have a Google search function while watching the news. You weren't able to like call out your news broadcasters when they were lying straight to your face. Not saying that Google isn't biased and putting out their search results, but yeah. So there's always a bias with Ever News. I know some of you, I'm sure most of you know that. And so my goal with my whole 1 Minute News is to create unbiased 1 Minute News every single morning, where I just give you the facts and stuff you need to know. And I hope you guys are enjoying that. Some of the bonus episodes, I had one guy comment, was like,
okay, that was like 29 minutes, so you should change your name.
The 1 Minute News is also just an idea of you can fit everything you need to know about what's going on in the world in about a minute a day, and yet there's 24-hour news streams. So it just kind of shows you how ridiculous they are. And I wanted to break through that. But these bonus episodes are just me doing commentary because I have a bunch of listeners that enjoy my commentary, which I appreciate, every single one of you that do. I hope you enjoy me diagnosing some of culture and stuff like that. I'm just your average Joe. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys support this person and you're with me. Whether you agree with her or not, it's okay to support people who you don't agree with. And I support anyone who is open to talking about ideas and open to discussing new truths, especially in journalism, because that is the entire point of journalism, is to discover new truths, not to just write a narrative. And I'm tired of listening to a narrative, and I'm tired of hearing every question be biased, and especially at the White House press conferences with Kayleigh McEnany, where the questions aren't questions, but they are an opportunity to make her look try to make her look stupid, because it doesn't work very often. She's always ready, because you know why she's always ready? It's because she already knows what you're going to say, just like America does, before you even ask the question. So stop just creating the same narrative and ask a real question to her, and maybe you'll surprise her. Thanks, guys, so much for listening. I appreciate every one of you. Probably do this more often. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.